All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a really interesting idea today, how the culture you live in actually, literally helps build the reality you experience every single day. We'll break down what culture is and get into this whole concept of the social construction of reality. Okay, exam time is coming up, right? So we're going to focus only on the core concepts you absolutely need to nail this. Let's get straight to it. So first things first, what even is culture? Well, you can think of it as the whole package. You know, the values, the beliefs, the behaviors, and even the physical stuff that make up a society's way of life. It's basically the shared blueprint that everyone in a group uses to navigate the world. And it's important to know that culture isn't just one big blob. It's really got two sides to it. On one hand, you've got material culture. That's all the physical stuff we create, our technology, our art, our phones. And on the other hand, there's non-material culture. These are the ideas, the values, the beliefs that you can't touch, like the concept of freedom. Okay, this next part is a huge one for your exam, so listen up. It's about two different ways of looking at other cultures. First, there's ethnocentrism. That's when you judge another culture using your own culture as the default, as the right way of doing things. The opposite of that is cultural relativism, which is all about trying to understand a culture by its own standards. So if culture is this big shared blueprint, what's it made of? Well, for your exam, you just need to remember that there are 5 core components that make up any culture. Component number 1, symbols. These are pretty much the building blocks of a culture. A symbol is, well, it's anything that carries a specific meaning for a group of people. Think about a stop sign, a flag, or even a simple hand gesture. They're packed with meaning that everyone in that culture just gets. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Symbols are not universal. A perfect example is the thumbs up. Here in the US, it means all good or great job. But you try that in parts of Greece or the Middle East, and you've just seriously offended someone. It goes to show you context is everything. Okay, component number 2, language. Now, language is way more than just talking. It's a whole system of symbols that lets us communicate. And here's where it gets kind of wild. And this is a key theory to remember, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. This idea suggests that the language you speak doesn't just describe your reality, it actually shapes how you perceive it. So what does that actually mean? Well, the classic example is that the Inuit language has tons of different words for snow. It's not just about having more words, it's that having those words allows them to see and experience their snowy environment with a level of nuance that someone with just one word for snow can't even imagine. All right, moving on to component 3, values. Values are the shared ideas a culture has about what's good or bad, desirable or undesirable. You can think of them as the culture's moral compass. They guide what the society thinks is important and worth striving for. A really clear example of this is how many Western cultures tend to value individualism, personal success and achievement. Compare that to many Eastern cultures, which often prioritize collectivism, the harmony and well-being of the group as a whole. Okay, number 4 is beliefs. Now, beliefs are a bit more specific than values. They're the particular convictions that people in a culture hold to be true. So, if a value is education is important, a related belief might be a college degree is necessary for success. And finally, component 5, norms. Norms are basically the rules for how to behave. They're the established guidelines that tell us how to act in any given situation. You could almost call them the unwritten and sometimes written instruction manual for social life. And for your exam, you have to know that there are 2 main types of norms. You've got mores, which are these super important norms with strong moral significance. Think laws against stealing. Breaking a more has serious consequences. Then you have folkways. These are the more casual, everyday norms like rules for table manners. Break a folkway, and you might get a weird look, but you're not going to jail. Okay, so we've got the 5 building blocks of culture. Now for the really cool part. How did these things actually come together to construct the reality we live in? You're going to want to memorize this next one. It's called the Thomas Theorem, and the quote is, "If men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences." What that means is that what we believe to be true has very real objective results, even if our belief is based on something false. Here's the perfect example to use on your exam. Think about a fake speed camera on the side of the road. The camera itself does nothing, right? It's just a box. But because drivers define that situation as real, they think it's a real camera,
The consequence is very real. They slow down.
Another key theory here is Goffman's dramaturgical analysis. Goffman had this great idea that social life is basically like a theatrical performance. We all have a front stage, which is where we perform our roles for our audience, like when you're at work or in class. And then we have a backstage, like at home, where we can drop the act and just be ourselves.
The textbook example for this is a waiter. On the front stage, out in the restaurant, they're polite, they're smiling, they're playing the role of good waiter. But as soon as they get to the backstage, the kitchen, they might drop the smile and complain about a difficult customer. Same person, different performance.
Now, of course, not everyone in a society follows the exact same script. You also need to know the difference between a subculture and a counterculture. A subculture is a group that exists within the larger culture but has its own distinct values. Think gamers. A counterculture, on the other hand, actively pushes against the dominant norms, like environmental activists who challenge consumerism.
One last concept, globalization. It sounds like a fancy word, but it's a pretty simple idea. It's what happens when a global product is adapted to fit a local culture. The go-to example is McDonald's. It's a massive global chain, but in Muslim-majority countries, they have halal menus. It's a global idea made local.
Okay, so if you want to really lock this stuff in, you can find the full summary and some great practice tests to get you ready for your exam over at gradeguru.nl.
All right, so let's boil it all down. For your exam, here's what you absolutely have to remember. First, the 5 components of culture: symbols, language, values, beliefs, and norms. Second, know the difference between ethnocentrism, which is judging from the outside, and cultural relativism, which is understanding from the inside. Third, the Thomas theorem. What we believe is real becomes real in its consequences. And finally, Goffman's dramaturgical analysis. Our social lives are split between a front stage performance and a backstage reality.
So as you're studying, here's a little something to chew on. Since we know our reality is socially constructed, what's one unbreakable rule in your own life that's actually just a shared agreement? Something that only exists because we all pretend it does?